Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? This is, I think this is my first time presenting at a virtual conference. Huge thanks to ODSE for putting this on. I'm very excited to be talking to you guys today. Okay, cool. Let's get started. Let's get started. So the topic of my talk is in the defense of data, delivering value during a global crisis. So very timely topic. I hope to dive into this and share some thoughts. So first of all, who am I? Who am I? So I'm Alex Dean. I am the CEO and co-founder of Snowplow. Snowplow is a data delivery platform that collects and operationalizes behavioral data at scale. So we help you and the data team that you're a part of to rise above the difficulties of delivering data, organizing data, and help you to focus on your data journey. I'm also the co-author of a book called Event Streams in Action from Manning, and I'm pleased to say that we've actually made the book free until the end of May as part of Manning's kind of coronavirus upskilling campaign, which yeah, I'm very proud to be a part of. So with that intro out of the way, I want to set the scene a little bit, and of course. This conference is virtual. We're not coming at you, presenting at you from Boston. The world, as everyone knows, looks very different from even just a month ago, even just a few weeks ago. That image itself is, everyone will recognize that image and know what that means and the goal of that visual. So, whatever the pundits say, there's a lot of people, a lot of speaking heads sharing their thoughts on all this stuff. I guess I'm adding to that now with my thoughts, but just remember through everything, that whatever the pundits say, none of us have experienced a global pandemic before. None of us really know how this plays out. And yeah, we should always bear that in mind whenever we're listening to thoughts and material on all of this. So in this chaotic time, companies can lose focus on why they decided to put data capability and intelligence at the heart of their strategy. All of the people that are here, all the people dialing into this, you're all data professionals. You probably work in a variety of different organizations that are investing in data, are taking this very seriously. And as data professionals, we're not always great at talking to those executives and explaining the value that we're unlocking for the wider business. That kind of communication is incredibly important. It becomes even more important in a chaotic time like this. So that's kind of what I want to talk about, what I want to help everyone through today. So I want to give you some actionable advice. I don't just want to sort of talk at you. I want to give you some actionable ideas to take back to your organizations and think about how we can navigate this situation in our teams, in our data teams. And so I wanted to do a few things. First, I wanted to share how we are thinking about the current situation at Snowplow. So I need to sort of share our thoughts on it so that places what I share later in context. I want to share a few promising signs. Like, it's not all bad news. I mean, obviously it's a deeply serious global situation, and I don't mean in any way to trivialize it at all, but there are a few green shoots and some promising signs that I do want to call out, that are some grounds for hope. I need to talk about delivering value. What does that mean? Like, what does it mean to be delivering value inside your organizations and making it clear that you are delivering value? I've got some ideas on what to do as a data professional in the next 12 months inside your organization. I've got a couple of ideas, a couple of suggestions of, I think, things not to do. And those are up for debate. I might not be right on those things, but I wanted to share my kind of gut thoughts on that. I just wanted to make a couple of predictions. Predictions are an incredibly dangerous thing to do, especially at this time. Very unlikely to come right, but I've spent a lot of time in the data space, and there's a few trends that I think we'll start seeing, and I wanted to kind of call them out. And if I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, then I'll try and own up to that in the future. And then I just wanted some closing thoughts. So I just wanted to conclude, and I think there should be time for questions. So if you do have questions, do pop them into the question box. I'm also available on Twitter. I think ODSE will also make it possible to ask questions afterwards in Slack. Like, I'm around. Like, do ask me questions. Yeah, let's go from there. So that's my talk today. Okay, So how are we thinking about the current situation at Snowplow? This is an important way of framing this. So at the moment, we are witnessing a global explicit switch off of the in-person economy. That's why I'm dialing into this remotely. I'm based in London, and this is an astonishing thing. And part of the tension here is this tension between financial time and economic time. So financial time is continuing. We have to pay the rent, the mortgage, the utilities. We have to pay for the car. We have to pay for the phone. We have to pay for nursery or school. So all of those commitments, those financial commitments are ongoing. But economic time has just, it's the great stop. We've had the shuttering of, leisure facilities, entertainment facilities, cafes, restaurants, stadia, cinemas, bars, all of that stuff. We've had schools and offices shuttered, flights and borders locked down. So it's an incredibly astonishing, surprising thing. And it's happened in individual countries over the years. Here in the UK, we had a great stop in the 1970s, but we've not had one of these global ones before. So this tension between the unstoppable force of financial time continuing and the immovable object of economic time pausing is it's a pretty shocking, startling thing to see playing out in front of us. Lots of people in tech compare this to 2008. That's not something I think is super fruitful. 2008 was a failure of the whole financial system, well covered in the movie The Big Short. There were lots of first order effects. For business owners, it was more worrying about where to put the money. But of course, Wall Street then led to Main Street failure, and then lots of businesses were failing and not hiring. At the time, for people who were working at that time, it was a deeply confusing time. It was very hard to interpret, even for insiders. Now I think it's much clearer what's going on. It's much less clear what the repercussions will be. But 2008, 2009 was a very complex story. A lot of businesses did great in 2008, 2009. So I think I'm not going to spend a lot of time comparing things back to then. I think we're in new territory now. But yeah, that's my kind of thoughts on that. We're kind of working on the assumption, and I think pretty much everyone is now, that a kind of global recession is in place. It's obviously hitting Main Street very hard, broad brush, hitting a lot of sectors, every sector with an in-person component, retail, travel, non-digital entertainment, all incredibly hit hard. Startups have been hit super hard as well. Nothing systemic, thankfully, in Wall Street at the moment. So no kind of compounding second order, third order effects, but everyone's keeping a close eye on that. If you're interested in following those kind of economic, financial side of things, then Matt Levine's newsletter, his Bloomberg newsletter, is very good on that. So yeah, that's kind of the context. I doubt there's very much in here that's surprising or different from what you guys are seeing, but I just wanted to place our thinking on this in context. It's not all bad news. So there's a few interesting trends here that I wanted to call out. So the first, of course, is just the huge rise in data. Everyone is an armchair data analyst now. These were some screenshots, some graphs I pulled, and I could have, if I'd had more time, I could have put another 20, 100 graphs on top of this. The extent to which cuts of data, graphs of data, extrapolations, communication with data has become a mainstream thing is actually, when you think about it, really surprising. It's never really happened to this extent. It's really kind of popularized the use of data to make points and to debate what's going to happen next, which is super interesting. This is another point. So this is a point that's been made to me a few times in the last month, and now it's been turned into memes as well. So we know it's a big trend now. So when people talk about COVID-19 as a digital transformation or causing digital transformation, that's flippant, but there's something important here. So every major company has been trying to achieve this digital transformation over the past 20 years. So every company that wasn't born a digital native, that wasn't Uber, Airbnb, Netflix style kind of built for those environments, built for that kind of data-rich environment, the cloud, etc. Those kind of more incumbent companies have been trying to achieve these digital transformations. Large-scale change management, reflecting new technology horizons, the consumer shift to digital, etc., etc. Now, those projects normally fail. The failure rates on those projects have been really, really high. What you can say about today is that this digital transformation piece, it's not a nice to do anymore. It's essential to survival. And COVID-19 is just massively accelerating behavior change, right? So, if you think about a lot of these things that have changed over the last few months across the world, in-person doctor appointments, cinema movie windows, high street stores, all in-person office spaces, the multiple other things on that list. None of that is going to come back to the same extent after this. Like, those behavioral changes have accelerated, underlying changes, and so the world is just going to, this is not the new normal. The world will change again, but this has accelerated massively, this kind of move, or re-accelerated this move to digital. So that's an important trend for us all to be aware of in data. I think this is another thing that is a kind of a positive sign I wanted to call out. So I think quarantine, this idea of self-isolation, this idea that we need to be kind of, life under lockdown, as it's sometimes called here in the UK, like, it's unleashed an awful lot of learning, an awful lot of creativity, some reskilling as well. So, people are dusting off old hobbies, they're learning new skills, they're developing new capabilities. It's a great time to invest in personal development. A lot of people are going deep on the kind of topics that, they always wish they had time to look at, and just have passed us by while we've been sort of busy keeping up with the business as usual. So I'd say here, kind of like, expect to see a lot of reskilling going on. I have a personal kind of pet theory that we're probably going to see quite a lot of general software devs reskilling and upskilling and moving into the data space, because personally I think the data space is going to be a kind of a probably not short term but mid-term kind of I think mid-term it'll kind of bounce back and we'll probably pick up faster than some other areas. And so I expect us to kind of have people pulled into our space from outside. And those people are out there right now, like, attending conferences like this, getting books from Manning and O'Reilly and people like that, and just generally kind of, doing loads of online courses and generally kind of upskilling. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of creativity unleashed. So that is at least another positive. So I've talked a bit about my context, how I'm viewing what's happening. I've highlighted that there are a few positive things to think about. Now I want to kind of talk more about the core of the talk. So this idea of delivering value. So we're data professionals, we're working at organizations. We want to make a difference. We want to prove our value, prove the team's value to these organizations that maybe at the moment are a little bit distracted, or bluntly incredibly distracted. But before I sort of dive into some tangible ideas, I just want to talk very high level about what I mean by value. And there's two lenses I'd really like to use here. So one is a lens around business impact, and another is around the idea of weight and variance. And I think these are both kind of helpful frames in slightly different ways. So I subscribe to Avinash Kaushik's newsletter. He's kind of sits on the intersection of analytics and marketing. He's very savvy. He did a great post a few months ago before all this on business impact. And he had a metaphor. It was a slightly tortuous metaphor, but he was talking about how, like, often in a company, you've got your data, you're presenting that as this kind of beautiful rose bush. You're really showing your work, how kind of exciting that is. Everyone's loving it. They're saying that's a great rose bush, but the house behind is going up in flames. And slightly blunt metaphor, but I think it resonates. And his call to action was, look, if you've got 76 slides to present, just take the ones that speak to the 80% of business value delivered by the stuff you're doing. And he was like, I guarantee that those 76 slides will go down to 10 or less slides. Like, probably a small chunk of what you're doing is delivering most of the business impact. So that's something to bear in mind. Like, Avinash he's a great blog newsletter author. Like, he's good to follow. And then I listened to this great talk by a professor called SONIA Marciano recently. It's a conference talk. She gave it, I think, a couple of years ago. It wasn't in any way related to COVID-19 situation, but she talked about value and variance. Or sorry, I should say weight and variance, weight versus variance. And it was really eye-opening to me. So the way she described it is, weight is how much value an attribute has in an overall estimation. So, like, how how much is that valued in the overall estimation of the worth of this thing? She mostly talks about products, but I think you could use it, apply it to data projects as well in the same way, or data products. But variance is really underlooked, and variance is how much difference in the possible values, the possible like weight even, that the beholder is willing or able to see. So she's got this kind of example, this funny example of her like daughter doing a high school assessment where you're being assessed on a course, and part of it is you've got to create a puppet. And the puppet is quite a high value component of the course. So 15% of the whole grade of the course is create a puppet. But what she kind of noticed is that the puppets just like, however good or bad your puppet is, the best puppet got an A, and the worst puppet was basically just a sock with a couple of eyes stitched to it or glued onto it, got a B+. So the weight was high, but the variance was pretty low. And so, what she said when you're thinking about projects, products, is think hard about working on problems that are high weight and high variance. And that means like think hard about working on the data problems in your organization that are valuable to the company, and they actually like will make a huge difference how well you do those things, like how much impact they're going to have. So these are just two lenses, and if you can take that back and think, well, this problem is high value, sure, but actually like I don't need to spend a lot of time on it because the variance in solutions is not super high, whereas this other thing is valuable and it's really tough to get right. So have a think about that. So what to do in the next 12 months. So this is just my views, of course, and there'll probably be some stuff in here that's obvious, some stuff that you disagree with. But yeah, I wanted to share my thoughts on this. So I think the first one is super important. Make sure that your company's faster decision-making loops stay data informed. So the key point here is your organization is suddenly having to make decisions in an incredibly sped up way because the global situation is so volatile. So, companies that were doing 12-month budgets now doing 3-month budgets. Companies that were meeting, the board was meeting every like 2 months and meeting every 2 weeks, all that kind of stuff. So the decision-making loops, the OODA loops, if you will, the John Boyd style observe, orient, decide, act loops, those are speeding up a lot now, an awful lot. And there's a key point here, which is if you're not able to provide timely data to support those decision-making processes, those processes will be made without your data. Like, those loops are leaving the station, they are happening. It's a matter of whether they're happening in a data-informed way or not. And to put a couple of analogies to this, like if your OODA loops are happening without data, they're happening without proper observation and orientation. So they're just decide, act oscillations, just like going in a very uninformed way. Equally, if you've got senior leadership, if you've got organization strategists who are trying to come up with a path through this without data, then to use the kind of Daniel Kahneman language, they're not using their system too. They're not using rational thought. They're not going slow. They are just doing fast, intuitive gut decision making, and that means they're not using all of the data capability that you've put in place in that organization over the last period. So I think in that the solution to this will look different for different organizations, but you need to think of ways to shorten your data lifecycle. So you need to think about moving from batch to real-time processes. You need to get cut humans out of the loop, drop the legacy manual processes if you've still got those. You need to bake more of your human analytical work into algorithms, make this stuff more self-service, all of this kind of stuff. But I think this is really, really essential. Like, and I can't stress this enough, like these decision-making loops have sped up. They've sped up for all companies. If you're not part of that, if you're not providing that data, those loops are happening without you. Those decisions are being made in a not data-informed way, and we know that that's not gonna have a good outcome. So if I sound a bit passionate about this one, it's because I really think this is really key. This is a little bit more of a slow burner, but I think this is valuable. So try and add forward deployments of data to your stack, to what you're working on. Don't just maintain backward-looking solutions. So a lot of data teams are really focused on these backward-looking solutions, historical look back, all this stuff in the data warehouse or the data lake, explaining what has happened. But to be honest, like analysis of the business, the organization's performance this year is going to be dominated by COVID-19. There'll be some really valuable stuff to do there to unpick the COVID-19 factors from what else was happening in the business, underlying things. But the truth is that this situation, this global situation, is just going to dominate everything, right? So there's going to be diminishing returns in, how many reports are you going to have to annotate saying, because of COVID-19, this is why this looks the way it does. So I would think instead about how you can push hard into forward-looking data deployments. Sometimes these are called operational analytics. There's a lot of like real-time streaming analytics, all this kind of stuff. But fundamentally, how can you use data algorithms and ML to improve key operational decision-making around whatever is important to the ongoing kind of viability of your business? So, maybe you're a subscription business, it really matters about churn reduction. Maybe you're a transactional business, you really care about fraud detection in this environment, just-in-time delivery, whatever it is. So, really think about how you can operationalize some of this stuff. How do you, and operationalization is super important here. So, how do you link the propensity to churn to interventions that the customer team is going to make? How do you actually get that deep learning, prototype that you've been working on for ages? How do you actually get that into production? How are you going to ship that? So, I think we often spend a lot of time as a profession learning about the technologies and the tools. I think we've got to spend more time now, thinking about how we're going to operationalize this stuff. And I think Carl Gold, Chief Data Scientist of Zuora, I think he's been giving a talk at ODSE as well. I wasn't able to make that, but here's a plug for his book, Fighting Churn with Data, because this book is one of the few books that's actually there is data, but let's actually use that data to solve business problems in an ongoing fashion. So these are the kind of things we need to be doing now. Think about forward deployments. This is a more aspirational one. If you can build that awesome data product that everyone said was impossible. So this won't be true for all of you, but for many organizations, there's a good chance that your data team and your data capability are not directly on the critical path to your company's recovery from COVID-19 and the wider macroeconomic stuff. If that's true, then that gives you some air cover for this year to get the truly difficult things done that BAU has always got in the way of. What is that killer product, that killer data project that you always wanted to spike out? Potentially now is your time to do that. All I say is, if this is true, if this applies to you, just be respectful and mindful of your colleagues who may well be grappling with much more existential problems around this situation and around the company, the economy, all that stuff. So, just if you are one of the lucky people who has air cover and bandwidth to work on this kind of thing, then just do be mindful of others. This is a kind of a different tack. So figure out how to stress test your business. So stress testing has been in vogue in banking since Wall Street and the 2008 financial crisis. Stress testing is seeking to understand how financial institutions perform in drastic economic scenarios. What we now need to do is actually start stress testing mainstream. So we need to start stress testing organizations like the ones you work for. How resilient is that business? So it's a really worthwhile exercise to figure out what the stresses and drastic scenarios are for your business. Can you track them? Can you look for spikes, anomalies? Can you flag them to the right people at the right time for interventions? This might help you, catch other situations or just get a better handle on the current situation as it develops. So stress test your business, I think, is a big one. And then, of course, the final thing I wanted to call out is, of course, do help in the global recovery any way that you and your organization can. So, there's too many things to call out here. Like this shout out to the Alan Turing Institute's call for data scientists and data science organizations to help out. This closed a few days ago, but you can still register your interest, and they may do another wave of applications. But equally, I know there are so many other things going on, and there's so many different ways as data professionals that we can help out. So yeah, do that, and do encourage your employers to help out any way that they can as well. So that was the things that I think are worthwhile doing, or at least exploring and testing in your organizations for the next period. Here's a couple of things on how not to spend the next 12 months. And again, these are a little bit opinionated, but I wanted to share them. So I think the first one is, don't create an internal data breadline. So this is an expression I only heard really recently, but I think it resonated with me. So what is a data breadline? A data breadline is when different departments and managers in your company have to queue up to get their data reports, insights from the data team. In a COVID-19 world, everyone in your organization just needs so much data all the time. And so if they're all having to come to you and ask for this, that's just going to take up all your time. You're not going to be able to get anything done. The quality of the data you're sharing with them is going to decline because you're not able to go and like make the investments in improving it. So you've got to kind of really avoid this like downward spiral. So think really hard about how can you make the data you're already providing, the data that people might want, how are you going to make that as self-service as possible? Now I know that self-service is always a bit of a cliche, and like everyone's always like, yeah, we're self-service, we're not self-service, but just try and make small practical steps. Think about training, think about data catalogs, think about tutorials, just anything to kind of lift that burden, stop that queue forming. This is kind of a slightly different one. So don't over-engineer your data remit for future black swans. So it's very in vogue at the moment in business circles to think about the next black swan, think about resilience to future shocks. And the truth is, whatever the next black swan, whatever the next highly improbable event is, it just won't look like the last three ones. And nobody, you don't want to end up fighting the last war. And honestly, when we get back to recovery, businesses will revert to not caring a super amount to highly improbable events. And that's not a value judgment from me. The truth is, most public companies have a short life. Most startups have a short life. Most investors have a wide portfolio. There's not going to be a lot of investment, not a lot of appetite after this is all over to make individual businesses super resilient. So this is just about not going off on a real tangent on this. To be clear, still do fix the things that your stress test reveals. Like those are like systemic faults in the business. Fix those things. Anything that's broken or fragile, whether it's inside the data or the data is showing it about another part of the company, do go and fix those. Just don't get too speculative. So at this point, I just wanted to make a few predictions that relate to data. And have to always be wary. Making predictions is a risky thing to do, so I won't make too many. But this, I think, is an important one. So I think we're going to see a retreat from shiny objects. And look, I'm not don't take the things I've listed out here as purely shiny objects. I'm not saying that these don't have deep merit and they're not incredibly valuable areas to work on. The truth, though, is that a lot of organizations over the last couple of years have done quite a lot of experimental R&D things in very forward-looking, potential things for the future. And I think we're going to see a bit of a step back from that. So, this isn't to say that, if you work at an organization where neural networks are a deep core operational part of your business, of course you're not going to walk back from that. But if you're in a large kind of, slightly slow moving, enterprise that maybe experimented with a couple of the things listed here, those are the kinds of things that organizations are going to walk back from. So, I think we'll see a bit of a retreat, at least for the next year or two, from these, from whatever the shiny objects are at your company. I think instead we'll see a kind of a move back to basics. So, in previous talks I've shared this kind of data science hierarchy of needs. And the funny thing is, at previous talks I've talked about how we all as professionals want to move up this curve. We want to move from just basic data is available back up to data is high quality. The company is structured for data success. The leadership sees it as a data company, and then data professionals feel like they're doing industry leading or academia leading work. I think honestly in this environment we're going to see a move back down the stack. So we're going to see people moving much more towards, well, is the plumbing right? Is the data high quality? Do we have the data team and the data capability? Do we have enough access from that to the rest of the company and vice versa? Do we have the kind of data mesh working? So I think we're going to see a kind of a pullback from the more aspirational stuff to the more kind of day-to-day nuts and bolts. Let's just get the basics working here, and then we can push back, maybe back towards the shiny objects when this is all over. So that's a couple of things. I think the other thing, Snowplow, we're a software vendor in the data space. We've been going since 2012, so we've got quite a long view on the period. This is the data and AI landscape in 2019. Like, it's super crowded. Startups are having a difficult time in general in this economic climate. I think we're going to see quite a lot of consolidation. I think we're going to see some pivots. Sadly, we'll probably see a few of these data and AI vendors maybe shuttering. So yeah, I mean, this is the landscape. I just put a little arrow to Snowplow over here in the kind of data integration space, or that's how we were bucketed into this landscape. So, I mean, I would say this, I take it with a pinch of salt, but yeah, look hard at open source projects, look hard at open core software vendors. Just be a little bit careful there as this all plays out. So, one other prediction, this is an easy one to make, is that, all of us in data, our data journeys, the journeys that we're going on as individual practitioners, the journey that our team is going on, and the journey that the organizations we work for are going on, has got a lot more bumpy. Yeah, I think we'll all be kind of following this area very closely to see how things develop. So a bit of a wrap up. I've taken you through all that fairly fast. I wanted to make sure I left some time for questions. So the couple of things I wanted to just shout out. So we've just started our virtual event series at Snowplow, and it's all about doing data right. So it's very much about the quality, the ownership, transparency pieces around data. It's going to be a series of online discussions, data engineers, experts, industry leaders. Really encourage you guys to join up. Our first one, our launch session is on April 29th. And to find out more about Snowplow, of course, you can visit our booth in the Expo Hall for ODSC. Thank you so much to everyone at ODSC for putting on this event. I think it's really exciting to have this kind of virtual format, and I think this is the new. This is how things are going to be going forwards. So do join in and visit our booth. Our website's there. We're super active on Twitter as well. So yeah, we'd love to talk to you guys. And with that, I've got some time for questions. And let me see if there's any questions. Okay. How do I do this? I do. Someone said, can we stop the sound? Someone said this webinar will be recorded. Thanks. Carl said, thanks for the shout out, Alex. Always happy to shout you out, Carl. Sophie said, what should companies prioritize, quantity or quality of data? Which do you think has more value for decision making? That's a great question, Sophie. So I would say that in this environment, the most important things are the velocity of the data and potentially the variety, which is kind of those two aspects. And then we need to talk about quality as well. We always need to talk about quality. So the velocity is really important because of the OODA loop point, because of the fast decision-making loops. So the velocity's got to be high. You've got to have access to that data so you can make those decisions quickly. The variety is going to be important if there are, parts of the organization that you can't see into, you don't have data coming out of them, and they're important, and they're somehow critical in this environment, so in this kind of COVID-19 situation. So think hard about whether you've got data blind spots. The quality is really important. So you talked about quantity or quality. So quantity, I've said it's more like, it's not so much quantity, it's variety and velocity. On the quality point, quality is going to be super important because you don't have time in these fast decision-making loops to question the data. Like, the data just needs to be really good. You don't have time to do manual interventions. You've got to make fast decisions, snap decisions. Like, the quality's just got to be there. There's no time to go back and try and figure out, like, why the numbers from this system don't match the numbers from that system. So yeah, I'd say quality just has to be right. Velocity is key, and variety. Think about variety in case you've got like data blind spots. So yeah, that was, I think that was all the questions. Let's see if there's anything in the chat. No, any other does anyone who's listening, any attendees, does anyone want to ask any other questions? We've got time to answer them. I'd love to answer your questions on anything I've talked about. You can agree, disagree. Anything else? All right. Well, look, thank you. Oh, hang on. Maybe we've got something here. We've got 10 minutes left. We don't need it. We don't need it. We haven't got any more questions. So look, thank you everyone for listening. I really appreciated your time. Do go and jump and check out our booth, our virtual booth in the expo hall. It looks very cool. Thank you so much to ODSC for that. And yeah, just thank you to ODSC for doing this and for like getting us together as a community of data professionals and getting us to share ideas and thoughts. So yes, thank you all very much.